Hello?
Hello.
Hi, is this James?
Yes, it is.
Hi, James. It's Patrick with Oopgo. How are you?
Very good in yourself.
I'm good as well, thanks. Where are you calling us from, James?
Raleigh, North Carolina.
What's the weather like this time of year? Is it starting to get warmer? Or?
No, it's about 35 degrees and raining.
All right, I shouldn't have asked the question. My bad then. So to preface our conversation, I just wanted to let you know the purpose of the conversation on our end is just a 15-minute straightforward discussion and capabilities overview, showing what our company does, and then we can determine whether or not it would add value or be a potential fit within the Class G Interactive. So please feel free to interrupt me at any time. I'm just going to basically be showing you a few links and describing the benefits in each case. And if you have any other questions, feel free to go ahead.
Okay.
On that note, actually, James, I wanted to ask you, I'm pretty familiar with your company. I know we've spoken to a couple people from McClatchy, not Interactive, but can you tell me a little bit about your direct role as far as I know, as VP of Strategic Development?
I'm involved with several groups that have different responsibilities. One is product management. We have a team. It's actually the largest team that's in my group that determines the direction that the products we develop and also the products that we manage from third parties, direction those take. And there's also an analytics group. It's responsible for measuring our success on the web and other media. There is a person responsible for content syndication, and there's also a person responsible for, we call it business development. It's really a vendor vetting and negotiation team.
Okay, and that's all within the scope of your responsibilities, correct? Everything that was mentioned?
Yes.
Let me ask you, how familiar are you with what you guys are currently using on the analytics end? Anything either analytics or competitive intelligence based?
Fairly familiar. Like I said, the analytics group is actually in my division.
Okay. Would you mind sharing, I suppose, what current solutions you guys are currently using or how you're driving insight?
Well, can you specify what type of analytics?
Sure. I'm sorry about that. Website analytics, I guess. My guess is most cases enterprises either Omniture, Google Analytics, or IBM Core Metrics.
Okay, I got you. Yeah, we use Omniture primarily. I mean, we also use Quantcast and what's the other one? The one that works through ISPs, ClickShare and ComScore, but Omniture is the workhorse of all those.
Okay, and you, and obviously based on your answer, I'm assuming you're familiar with each of it, somewhat familiar with each of those products, so it would be relevant to differentiate directly?
Yeah, I mean, I'm very familiar with Omniture and fairly familiar with ComScore, less with the other two.
No problem. All right, yeah, I appreciate that scope. On that note, I'll introduce and say Oopgo. We're a digital marketing intelligence company, and what we provide is website intelligence, both with a Omniture type analytics solution as well as a competitive intelligence. So I guess out of those, probably closest to the Quantcast or ComScore. We have that in our one integrated module, and I'm basically going to be showing you the analytics for 10 minutes, then a few minutes on the competitive intelligence.
Okay.
So to begin on that end, I'll say, is my screen sharing correct? Do you see McClatchy Interactive on your screen, James?
Yes, I do.
What differentiates us from our analytics offering from traditional analytics is traditional analytics, if I'm navigating on your site and let's say I go page to page, what's being stored in each case is the transition of what happens when someone goes from one page to the next. So when you're looking at, quantitative data, you're seeing the numbers of entry points, where people came from, and all the data that goes when someone's moving from one page to the next. What our company is doing is we're storing the complete customer experience with approximately 1,000 times as much data for each customer visit. And common sense relevancy there for data, when we talk data, is if someone moves their mouse for 4 seconds and is stuck on the top right of your page, we're storing each of those data points, and we let your company search and say, out of the last 10 million visitors, how many other people have moved and had that same problem? If someone within a search bar wrote a term, find McClatchy, they deleted it, and they wrote find McClatch, we would be storing each of those as individual searchable points. So in this case, it would be to see how often are people deleting on this field, how many people are searching for this term before clicking search. So that's the long story short of how our data differentiates. We are the only solution and first solution to store to that level of depth when it talks about keystrokes and movement points as well. So the other side of that coin is, because we're storing all this information, we're able to replay back each of your customer sessions from the eyes of your customer as they happen, regardless of device. So what that means is traditionally, if you're looking at a analytics report and you want to look at a particular segment and a particular visitor, in our case, you can click play from every view and you can see what actually happened. And the purpose of that is to usually either improve the customer experience or to detect any pain points or potential opportunities that aren't as obvious by looking through streams of data. I'll let this play just for a couple seconds. And yeah, I mentioned the data initially just because it is, I mean, the videos are pretty straightforward, but the data element is important, because if we were giving videos on all of your site traffic for a high traffic site, no one has the 10 million hours to go through and analyze. But because everything you see is also be stored as a searchable data point, it means that everything you see is also stored, and you can just use the videos to determine the most relevant analytics and really define what your few KPIs that you actually look for on a top level report. Define those definitions a lot deeper. What's relevant here for most, particularly for the industry you guys are in, is this example here is the depth that we go into mobile in particular. Because as far as I'm concerned, and most people these days, mobile is still in discovery when it comes down to properly monetizing, laying out your site, understanding the difference between the value of the people who come from mobile versus computers, and of course aligning your visitors cross-channel to basically deal with them appropriately when they go from device to device. What you're going to be seeing here is a recreation. If someone's visiting your website from a mobile device, they're using their fingers to navigate. What you're going to be seeing is the replay of the fingers, and that's the orange and blue here, as well as the change in zoom and orientation. So the takeaway there, of course, aside from being able to see the mobile touch points and usability-wise, is also that because we're storing this information, you guys can dig into things such as what's the average engagement time someone is using on my page? How do I change that for mobile versus computer? What's the average orientation viewing this or that type of content? So it's just all about depth and clarity when it comes down to whatever goal you're trying to solve from an insight perspective. You have any questions, or do you want me to keep moving forward, James?
Keep going for now.
No problem. This particular view I'm showing, so our default, I mean, we're a web-based application. The login looks, I guess, pretty similar to Omniture. You log in, you see all of your macro-based data, and what I'm showing you here is kind of the depth you can dig from there. So what's on this screen is a recreation of live visitor website traffic. So in this case, if you wanted to highlight a high-value segment, if you wanted to look at people who came from Canada, and I don't know for your guys' property, someone who came from Canada and has read X or Y amount of articles the last 2 weeks, you could tag that segment and you could ask to view them live from a particular module. And we're able to recreate those sessions simultaneously. And the purpose here is either for usability analysis kind of ad hoc, or in many cases for customer servicing directly, because you can focus on a particular session or a particular client, and we have built-in engagements such as the ability to chat with them or the ability to send them a web page or send them to a predefined segment that is basically on a live basis. From here, this is another demonstration. This would all be built from our core views. If you click View Details on any individual customer, this example is a record that's created for every visitor on your website by default. What this is we call the entire customer view from one page. Let me refresh make sure I picked a good customer here. So the point here is you see their individual page from one view, and you're able to see a panoramic view of a visitor's entire session. The relevancy is we have this linked with all of a individual visitor's past history. So from one view, if you wanted to go dig deep into a customer's life cycle, you can see what they've done in the past, and it can be used both for dispute resolution or just for understanding trends that are correlated with successful customers versus none. Last detail here, I don't dig very deep in an introduction, but we also, every view in our module is synced with all of our data. Everything you see can be customized to your company's particular KPIs, such as, in your case, maybe articles read, subscriptions made, a partner that I want to take a look at as opposed to a client. What I'm going to be showing you now is just a couple minutes from the actual once you log in, just to understand, to frame the reference behind use of this product. I'm going to take a step back because, let me ask you, James, do you guys manage your other entities interactively? I know you guys own a few other media outlets. Are you guys responsible for the media, content analytics, etc.?
Well, it depends on what you mean by manage. We don't manage the content. That's done at the primarily at the local level, although we're in the process of re-centralizing some pieces of content that are essentially national and international. But for the most part, it's all local. We do manage the analytics centrally, and we manage other things like the advertising operations is managed centrally. So it just depends on what you're talking about.
Okay. Yeah, I guess in my case, the analytics is the most relevant one there. So, yeah, the point being was that our last view, we do have an agency type view, so you can manage multiple properties from one screen, and you have complete flexibility. Everything is built in-house, so we have flexibility for a customization, such as I want these 5 domains or websites listed in this view. I want this page defined this way as opposed to this way. So, main thing I'm going to show here, we don't have time to dig into. I will say we are an advanced analysis tool similar to an Omniture when it comes down to being able to manipulate the data in quite a few ways. But all I'm going to be showing here is the general transition from looking at a page segment to the video view. In this case, if we look at a particular example, let's say someone who came from Google to your website, you're able to look at this information from a page-specific view where one piece of data is created for each page, or you're able to seamlessly switch to a customer view. So if you had one customer who visited 30 pages over the course of 3 or 4 sessions, this information could seamlessly switch once you're in the back end itself. So it all depends on what kind of analysis you want to do internally. The other relevant detail here, of course, you could play the videos directly as demonstrated earlier, and the history view is relevant because once you're taking a look at a particular segment, you click View Details here, and that's the transition to see this individual customer's history. The last, are you familiar yourself with conversion funnels or heat maps, James? Or do you guys actively use them?
Yes, not a whole lot of conversion funnels because we're not an e-commerce site. We do that with some of, like, subscription analysis, but the volume with that is fairly low relative to our overall traffic volume.
But heat maps is something you use?
I'm sorry?
I'm sorry, you are familiar and currently use heat maps, correct?
Correct.
Okay, I'm just going to log it. The core difference, so we provide click maps and heat movement maps, and our heat maps, of course, are all based off raw data. It doesn't have to be associated with only clicks that led to someone going to the next link. The bigger differentiator on our end, a few companies are doing heat maps now, is in our case, let's say you used a click heat map and you saw 10 people are clicking on the top right of your site. You still have to identify the problem that caused this. And I mean, the only way to identify the problem is look at each individual instance to figure out, was this a problem with responsive design? Was someone using a mobile phone where the search bar showed in the top right? Or was this something on our site that looked like it might be clickable? The difference with our, because our intelligence suite is all directly integrated, in our case you can click and view that particular session to solve those problems. So that's the practical use case, as opposed to diving through pounds of data, is to define, look for problem segments, look for the solutions by watching them in common sense. And in a lot of cases, companies will discover, for instance, page errors were the source of something that they may have attributed to the marketing department. So it just kind of gives clarity, and a lot of times when it comes down to non-technical or analytics-oriented marketing professionals, they can kind of figure out things for themselves. Aside from this, I think what would be relevant for your guys' case is let me load the appropriate page here. Oh, here we are. Okay. I brought this up because usually our first step for any enterprise company, when we talk about this storing 1,000 times as much data, a lot of times non-data centric organizations will say, that's the overload, what's the practical use? So when we talk about storing this extra data, in every case, we are customizing metrics and particular modules based on whatever your guys' goal is. So in this case, we have a bank client whose objective was to get better insight into the forms he fills out to understand the wealth management process on their website. So in this case, what we created as a sticky statistic is the confidence level of someone choosing their wealth. So if someone has 3 different choices before choosing where their investable assets are at, they would be 33% confident. The other metric we created here was if someone chose a higher number, then chose a lower number, they were targeted and tagged as a better upsell target. Because common sense, if someone orders a burger for $20, changes their mind last second and orders a $10 salad, there's a pretty good chance they have $20 in their pocket. So that's usually, that example isn't going to be relevant for you guys, but the applicability of using this data is usually making customized views to leverage it for what your company's goal is. And we do that internally as well. We do provide servicing, and on any type pilot account, we include a certain amount of hours to kind of show you what we could track that you currently aren't capable. This is the last view I'll show from our analytics. On the same premise here, we had a request to create, if someone fills out information and doesn't submit it, we are storing all of this pre-submit information in addition to, obviously, website owners get access once information submitted. So we created a custom view that references what actions were taken, whether they were abandoned, and of course referencing the information in the case of data submitted. I'm going to take a hard stop for a minute if you have, that's on our analytics end. Do you have any questions, James?
Yeah, I have a lot of questions. I guess first of all, if you're collecting 1,000 times as much data, what's the page load?
The page load is actually less on average than Omniture. It's compared to Google Analytics, the page load is less on average, approximately 200 to 300 milliseconds. And that's basically, to be blunt about it, that's behind our technology. We do have proprietary technology when it comes down to compression, and that's kind of the pain point from the Omnitures, the IBMs we spoke to, is what the difficulty in our end is. So.
And likewise, on the other end of the scale, what's your largest customer in terms of unique visitors on an annual basis?
We have two customers who are in the, I believe we go by page views monthly, right around the billion page view monthly range. Our product is almost, we are a fairly new company, but our clientele is almost exclusively enterprise. And then I'll tell you on that note, relevant in just about every case, moving forward with an enterprise, we will start with a pilot on a specific portion of their site to make sure, to basically qualify ourselves and ensure no scaling concerns.
So you're getting this granular amount of information about, with a billion page views, I would think you're physical count site, but you're probably talking at least a few hundred million uniques. So you're doing mouse tracking on a few hundred million individuals, right?
Correct. Yeah, our pain point data-wise is the actual movement on the page as much. So we do run a diagnostic test on each site to see the load it will create, and so.
And how at that kind of scale, how is that information digestible? It seems to me it would be equivalent to path information, which on a massive scale just turns into noise. I mean, unless you have some clear trending or some clearer patterns emerging, it just turns into noise. I mean,
I agree on that's the question we always have to answer. On the surface level, we're not creating 10,000 metrics. We're not outputting all the information we're storing by default. We're just giving a data source to basically define what your KPIs are in a clearer way. In this example we mentioned, if you wanted to store a metric that's created when you write find McClatch and then click delete twice, you would only create that individual metric. You wouldn't want to see every instance where anyone types anything. And that's the information you would use within your dashboard and integrate into any traditional analysis. That's how it almost always works, is talking about discovery of which data you want to use and knowing you have the capability of getting to that specific level.
So you're not recording all the activity of all the users. You're just recording certain test sets.
No, we are recording all of it. What I'm saying is it's not output by default within the analytics module. It's searchable. If you want to look for a trend that happened in the past, if we're talking about more like events, how they're set up to say I want to capture only this, we're storing all of it by default. You can go in the past and search for it, but for practical use on the top level, you usually want to define that and segment it into a few different KPIs, and we just have the ability to do that with more precision with more data.
Okay. So for all this capability, what does it cost? We generate about 4 billion page views a year, so I guess it comes to about 300 million, 350 to 400 million page views a month.
The way our pricing works, I'm not even going to give a ballpark. When we go above a 5 to 10 million range, the way we get a cost is we run a one-day test, load on your server, and we give you a direct variable cost based off that test. That's basically
you have to give me something to go on, because we're not going to get that far without knowing what the potential cost is going to be.
I'm trying to reference where we're at. I would say probably for you reference 350 million, but the cost, I'm sorry, to reference is not unique, total page views. What did you say your monthly rate was at? Ballpark, James?
I'm sorry.
You
for
said
page views?
350 million page views monthly, right?
Well, let me just pull up a recent month and I'll take a look. That's about right. That's 350.
I mean, I would say ballpark, you're looking at 6 figures a month. That's the ballpark based on that number. I just know what our
Yeah,
charges are on the
that,
two
you're
billion.
talking about 100,000 or 900. I mean, 100,000 or 900,000.
100,000.
Okay.
So that's the ballpark. I'll mention on that note, for our larger traffic clients, neither of them have their entire site set up this way. They're both on particular segments. We do store in the billion page view range, but in both cases, they don't want it on every single page on their site. But of course, you do have that option if that's the case. So, yeah, I would say that's that's probably pretty close to a ballpark we're looking at. So. Our other hard cost is just comes down to setup. That's on a per domain basis, and that would be on average around 30 hours on a hourly basis. And once that's done, that's the pain point's basically over, and implementation would be between 8 to 12 weeks on average. So this isn't, you know, completely out of the box, but it comes down to the videos and taking a look at your site structure and doing everything as efficiently as possible on both ends.
Well, why does it take you 30 hours per domain to set up? I mean,
it's all dependent on structure. If you have a lot of dynamic elements on your website, if you have Flash, if you have things kind of loading in the background, they just need to be customized, because by default, if you take the code stored on a site and you spit it back out, if it's all HTML, it's going to take 0 seconds. So that's the long story short. There's just a lot of instances when it comes to third-party advertising and other issues that need to be tweaked out. But when we do that for any agency who's talking about multiple sites, we can give them a quote up front, and it's always going to be significantly less. That's kind of the max on our end. So if you were to give us X amount of sites in advance, we would have our implementation team look through those site structure. And in a lot of cases, it's probably going to be closer to 2 to 3 hours. The 30 hours is in case your site's going to be a headache, basically. So.
But you've got to customize for everything that's dynamic on the page.
Not everything dynamic. I could have a tech person explain that better, but no, not everything dynamic, just particular elements. I don't know off the top of my head the correlation with Ajax, but certain cases need to be customized.
Because that could be massive. I mean, well, does that include advertising, or is that aside from advertising?
No, almost every site, almost every client we deal with is retail based, has a lot going on their site. When we talk about that 30 hours, if you have 50 different hovers going on, third party, 30 hours is pretty close to a max on that end. So that's not assuming it takes 5 hours for each dynamic interaction, just kind of taking it in as a whole for how we have to deal with the data. And that all correlates. Go ahead.
What do you do about responsive design?
It's accounted for. Are you familiar with the terminology viewport? We are storing viewports with all these videos. We're not taking a picture of what happens. So responsive design is completely accounted for.
But do you have to customize for that?
Absolutely not. No, that's all out of the box. You know, we talk about the customize. It's more just looking at the structure and seeing if there's things that we'll need to do directly.
So are you able to measure traffic by geographic location?
Yes, we do. Aside from all of the deeper differentiators I focus on, we store ISP, company information, geographic information, zip code, I believe what's the terminology, DMA code, and quite a few demographics in addition to all this, but that's usually not the bigger differentiator. So we have one data source that is basically storing all of this information from one view, and everything that's being output here can be modularized out, but we have the capability to unify your data into one source.
So I can get mobile monthly unique visitors for a particular DMA, for example.
Correct. Yeah. Here's a particular, I mean, we also create heat maps based off location, and I believe I'm in my development environment, but we have heat maps created based off a few of these statistics as well. We have a few different reporting engines that let you, I mean, to be honest, it's pretty similar when it comes down to analysis to Omniture setup in a lot of cases. We did know that was the industry standard, but you can manipulate your data and dig around and slice and dice it and just about any way you want. The big difference is, you know, the case I mentioned with this form analysis overview is we can also create custom dashboards with a lot of these because we're doing everything at the source. So this case, that was that was under 10 hours for us to customize statistics for a form, such as saying, I want to figure out what's important on this form. And this all depends on how deep your organization wants to go, because we provide a servicing in all these regards to use this data efficiently. So.
And in terms of the content identification, how rich is the ability to identify the individual pieces of content? I mean, is there, what kinds of options do we have?
I'm sorry, to identify individual content. You want to know.
We want to know what the headline of a story is. We want to know what its taxonomic category is.
No, that can. We're storing all that information.
Section on the site it is.
We're storing all of that information. So the answer for this is you would create a tag for, other than having the traditional SEO related data such as page tag, title, loading, page load time. We can tag any particular page on your site to be listed as a metric as well. One detail that go ahead, James.
How many identifiers like that can we have? Is there a limit, or?
No, it's not a limit. We give you, assuming if your company is fairly technical, we give you raw source. We have to obviously sign disclosure, but we give you a raw source to our data source itself. So we basically if you have a development team, they can slice and dice all they want with complete ease, or you can use a default module. So
if we add identifiers, we would have to go hack into your code to surface them?
No, you don't. I brought up a probably too raw of an example. The main way you would create an identifier is through a tagging system, either a tagging system or going to a create metric where you would, I guess my point was you need to know what you're doing within the code to label those. So you don't need to go hack into the system. It all is throughout of the box, and a lot of times companies will just want us to help define those, to help go into the code and label those appropriately, if that makes sense.
Okay. And can we extract this data into a spreadsheet?
Yes, you own the data. I believe by default CSV, XML, a few different formats we're able to do without an issue. And that is all from a reporting dashboard that can be customized to the metrics that you define. So
you could set up schedule reports.
Correct. You can also set up multi-agency levels if you want to set up different levels of admin authority and storage and usage. That's almost always the norm, to give different levels of usage to particular sites, etc.
Okay.
Any other questions, James?
I'm not thinking of any at the moment.
If you don't,
if I think of one, I'll shoot you a note.
Okay. Do you mind? I know we went a few minutes. Do we have time to show our competitive intelligence for a few minutes? You have an extra 10 minutes, James, or what's?
Yeah, let's go ahead.
No problem. Okay. So that's the conclusion. Of course, we can always take a dig or dib on any particular, deeper dig on a particular capability. But the other end of the coin from what our company provides is, one moment, please. So mainstream search engines, you have Google, you have Bing, you have Quantcast and Alexa store a certain amount of website domains. Google, it's estimated, has approximately 20 to 30 million. Quantcast, I believe, is around maybe one. One is what they store. The long story short being here is our company has we've been indexing the entire internet the last 5-6 years, and we have approximately 180 million total websites in one unified data source. And when we say total websites, that's the public source code from every website on the internet. Our practical deliverable here, because it's not 1994 anymore, people don't care about being able to do broader search, is we provide competitive intelligence for companies to take a look at what their competition is doing, as well as defining any kind of monitoring on their industry or on a global basis. And I think it's easiest if I walk through this example before a question. So in this example, a sample deliverable here would be you monitoring particular competitors. We would be storing their traffic rank increases and decrease on a monthly basis. You would see 1 month, competitor X had a 41% traffic rank, and the changes in their source code correlated that where, for instance, 50,000 Facebook likes, they had 10,000 tweets, they had 2 headline changes. In a lot of cases, there's going to be a correlation between those actions. The other common sense usage of that is to identify technologies. If XYZ technology comes out tomorrow and you want to take a look at, you want to define your industry as 50,000 websites based on a filter criteria. You could say, out of these 50,000 websites this month, we're going to search their source code and see which technologies are listed at what percentage. So it's just all comes down to, it's not always going to give you all the answers, but it's automated awareness into kind of what's happening on the internet. So that's, it's obviously a separate database. It doesn't require anything downloaded on the local end. It's basically just a large database that lets you get patterns from what's happening. And every 24 hours, every time a website is registered, we're storing that information. So another use, I guess it would probably be practical for a company of your size, would be for brand reputation, brand management. If you want to add any kind of triggers, usually triggers are set on Google or a different website where you have to wait until that domain is indexed. In our case, you're going to proactively identify any kind of brand changes or any site illegally using your brand a lot more proactively. I am going to show you in this case, I will say this is more of a customized feature. It requires a few meetings to determine what you want to take a look at, but I'm going to show you one other module, another practical use that we use from this capability. What this is James, are you familiar with the term auto search functionality?
Is that the same thing as prompted search?
It's probably, yeah. It's basically if you go on Google and you put in a term, it correlates the associated terms that are most popular based on what actually people search for.
Yeah, got it.
Okay, so I guess let's see what we do as a added functionality here is we store, for particular terms, we store on every large search engine on the internet, we store all the associated key terms for particular keywords of use. And what we'll detect here is, let's say that someone suddenly starts using McClatchy orange in a lot of cases. They're using it to do searches on Amazon. They're using it in Yahoo. It's a proactive way to detect this information while it's still in the search queue. It just provides a deeper insight into what your consumers are looking for, consciousness in a lot of cases, to figure out, what's the right way to say mobile these days. So this is another, this particular is a built-in feature, but this is the long story short of our competitive intelligence offering. So do you have questions in that regard, James, or is that relevant to what you do, I suppose?
Maybe. I can't think of a case at the moment, but maybe. Okay.
So on that note, and I should probably mention as well, here it's, all of this is modularizable, but by default it is baked into the same module. You can select your competition. You can search for domains live. I can choose, here's every website using ABCD, choose, add. So it is pretty, it's pretty user-friendly to set up as well. So I'm going to take a hard stop on my end. Do you have any other questions at this time, James? That's basically the conclusion from a introduction standpoint on our end.
Can you do ad hoc looks at specific sites this way?
Yes.
Competitive.
Yes. We don't by default update every site always, but if you want to, what we do is you tag particular sites or competitors, and we can set analysis to trigger, for instance, every hour on that site.
Okay.
So let me ask you, James, at this point, you had a few questions, and I appreciate people who understand all of this pretty well. As a next step, are you interested in taking a deeper dig? Would you like to take a look at a few things? What's your opinion on your end?
Maybe. I'll need to discuss it with my analytics director, and it may be that it's him who follows, just he who follows up with you. But I'll have to have that conversation first.
Okay. So on our end, I'm assuming that sending a couple overview documents would be relevant, or any other
Yeah,
requests?
but I don't. Have you actually had a deck? I think you've just shown this to me live, right?
Correct.
Anything like that that will show him examples of the functionality. I mean, he may want to get on the phone and sort of repeat this exercise with you, but the more I can show him up front, the better.
Okay. And yeah, on that note, I'll mention, because the point we get with every enterprise is, I will say, usually we are not replacing the Omniture up front. We are doing a pilot on a particular portion of the site that's not going to conflict with any other technologies you're using. That's usually the point we get. Our company is fairly new, a year and a half for their analytics technology. So usually that's the issue that comes up with any as the next step, is doing a pilot for 3 months before qualifying ourselves. So I'll mention that just for your data guy, and I'll be referencing an email with the difference between a pilot versus a complete implementation. So.
Well, yeah, we would insist on that, actually.
Yeah, I'm sure.
They wouldn't be blindly making the switch wholesale.
Okay. All right. Well, I really enjoyed the conversation, James. I'll follow up with you within 24 hours, and any other questions, please reach out to me directly.
Okay.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Bye.